The first unit of this course is going to talk about choosing a email provider and a screen name to use with your email address. The conventions that are used globally, internationally for email might be quite different from what you're used to. So we're going to focus on 5 main areas. I'm going to talk about some different providers that are options. I'm going to talk about why I recommend Gmail, and also why this course is going to focus on Gmail. Then I'll mention using organizational email, like email that you're required to use for work. And then also the possibility of paying for email. This seems quite unusual probably to you, but in the future, I think paying for email is going to be really important. Maybe not in the next couple of years, but I think 5 years out, 10 years out, it's going to be a lot more common and normal for people to actually pay for their email service. And then finally, maybe the most important part of this lecture is going to be choosing your screen name. Okay, so I'm based out of South Korea, and I notice a lot of people in South Korea use screen names that are just a jumble of letters, because what they do is they type it in Korean, but with the language options on English, so it just looks like a string of English letters. But for communicating internationally, globally, communicating in English, coordinating with your colleagues and counterparts overseas, I'm going to introduce a better approach for choosing a screen name. Okay, so let's jump right into it. I have used various email providers in my own history with email. I used a service called Juno. That was my very first email back in, 20 years ago or so. Juno.com they were the first one to offer free email. And they don't really exist anymore. Well, they do, but they're not in the email business. They're a internet service provider. Yahoo also was a big provider, and they were actually a portal site. So you signed up for their email address. You weren't only signing up for email, you were signing up for kind of a customized homepage that when you started your browser, it would start with your local weather, your local news, that kind of stuff. Those kind of services are still around, just not quite so popular, because we get those options on our smartphones and through other ways. Yahoo also recently had a very bad data breach. Okay, so it was hacked, and millions of its users had their information exposed. So if you have an old Yahoo account, a lot of people like me, if you're anything like me, you have a Yahoo account, but you haven't used it in a long time, you need to go on and maybe even deactivate your account, or at least, change the password at the very minimum. Hotmail has gone through a couple changes as well. In recent years, it's kind of changed over to live.com or outlook.com, although hotmail.com is still active. So if your email address is at Hotmail, it's still active. It's just through the live.com or outlook.com interface. Okay? And finally, Gmail. Gmail is really becoming quite standard. Gmail does have really nice services, although there's some drawbacks to it as well, right? It is very reliable. You can always count on Gmail to be up and running. It very, very rarely goes down. It's easy to use, easy to get started. It's cloud-based, so you can use it at home, you can use it on your smartphone, you can log in at work just in a web browser, versus using a client program like Outlook, for example, or Thunderbird or something like that, where it's kind of tied to the computer that you have that program installed on. Also, Gmail, I'm going to talk about problems with Gmail privacy, but in terms of overall security, Gmail is actually pretty good on security. The HTTPS protocol that it uses is pretty decent. So, if you are checking your Gmail account at a coffee shop, you're not in, serious danger of being hacked once you log in. Now, the actual process of putting that password in may be an issue, but nobody's going to be reading your email. Now, there are privacy concerns from within the Google services. I'll talk about that in a minute. Well, actually, that's my next point with the ecosystem, right? So signing up for a Gmail address puts you into the Google ecosystem. What that means is Google has a suite of services. They have various services they offer their users. And I use that word users quite deliberately. You're not a customer. Okay, so a customer, usually pays for the service that they're using. And with Gmail, you're not doing that. You're not paying for the services that you're using. That means that you're not a customer. Now, Google does have customers. Do you know who they are? They are advertisers. So Google has computer algorithms that are actually searching your email account, searching through your emails, trying to determine the kind of thing that you're interested in, the kind of advertising that you would want to see. So in a sense, it's trying to help you. Google would argue that their algorithms are trying to help you by offering you, advertising that you are interested in, right? But some people don't like that. Some people don't like that kind of really targeted advertising. So if that's a concern of yours, you might, consider that when signing up for Gmail. But we are going to be focusing on Gmail in this course. Now, if you have a work email, I'm targeting this course primarily towards academics, so graduate students, professors, undergraduate students as well might find some interest in the course. Other people of course, can take the class, but I'm really targeting it towards people with an academic bent. So if it's a university email, you might have no choice but to use that email address. And, that's not a complaint, right? There are some good reasons why you should use that email address. There could be security reasons. They might have their own security protocols, depending on the line of work that you're in, the kind of research you're doing. That could all be really important considerations for you, right? It also has some credibility to it. When you share your email address, and it's not like a Gmail address, it's a university address, that has some weight, right? People see that and they say, oh, okay, this is a professor or this is somebody attached to the university. So it's a good thing, right? Problem is, some of these services are based on a client, kind of like Outlook. So they might be tied to a specific computer that you're working on, which isn't all bad, right? Because if you can only check your work email on your work computer, then when you're at home, you're not tempted to kind of log in and see what's going on or anything like that, right? You have to be at work. You have to be at the office or something like that to check your work email. So that can be a blessing. But for some people, like myself, I'm a professor. I actually don't spend 40 hours a week in my office necessarily. I work a lot at home because I have young children, so I have to put in a lot of work time after they go to sleep. And so rather than go into the office, I just stay at home and work. And Gmail actually makes it pretty easy to integrate other email services with Gmail. And so in the settings of Gmail, there's a way to configure it to actually kind of import that email, and Gmail will serve as your client. Okay, so if your company does have you set up with something like Outlook on your computer, it's probably pretty easy to go ahead and set it up with Gmail in a similar way. So that's something to consider. As we go through this program looking at Gmail, if you like it, you start using Gmail regularly, you might go ahead and work to import your other email accounts into Gmail as well. Paid email. As I mentioned, the trend these days is for free email. It's kind of it's certainly not very popular for somebody to offer a paid email service. The problem with this is you are not the customer. Usually a advertiser or other company is the customer. You are the user. To put it another way, you are the product, right? So the company is actually selling access to you to the other advertisers and things. Also, with a paid email service, they tend to be, a lot more strict on security. Although, as I mentioned, Gmail is actually pretty good in terms of security. So these considerations are worth thinking about as well. I like email. I'm an advocate of Gmail. I'm an advocate of Gmail. We're going to be using Gmail for this course, but I really like the paid email model. I have a paid email account that is really kind of top-level security and encryption. It's a service called ProtonMail, protonmail.com. But I don't really use it all that much, to be honest. Gmail is just so easy to use. And I use so many of the other Gmail services. I use the calendar, I use the Google Drive, for sharing documents and things. I'm really kind of locked into that Google ecosystem, which honestly is not really a good thing, because then all of my data is with Google. So if Google someday has a problem, like a huge massive hack happens or something like that, all of my life is kind of in with Google. And so, it's a good practice to kind of spread it around. And then, of course, using different passwords and things like that. Anyway, this is not a course on encryption and computer security. So I'm going to leave it at that with that discussion, and we'll go ahead and move on to choosing a name. Right? So choosing choosing a screen name for your email is actually pretty important. And I see a lot of people using, like I said, here in Korea, it just ends up like a random string of numbers or letters and numbers, like HBD4422, something like that. Or even worse, somebody that is not a native English speaker will choose just a word that they like. Right? So a word like purity or sexy or something, and then their name, and it's not really professional at all. Somebody sees that, it sounds like honestly like a teenager or something using that email address, and so you clearly don't want to use an email like that for professional purposes. So you need to use your real name. Now, a common name like John Smith, or even common names in your own native language. So like here in Korea, a name like Soo-yeon, Kim Soo-yeon, right? That's probably not available on Gmail. It's a really common name, right? But if you add in a title like Miss Kim Soo-yeon, if you mix it around like Soo-yeon Kim, Kim Soo-yeon, Miss Kim Soo-yeon, Miss Soo-yeon Kim, even maybe a degree. So with certain degrees like an MBA or a PhD, you can include that as part of your title with your name. So you could put Kim Soo-yeon PhD, Kim Soo-yeon CPA, Kim Soo-yeon MBA, like that, depending on your field. Right? So let's look at some examples of this. First, before our examples, if you still can't find a screen name that works for you, you can add some certain adjectives that have a connotation of making a connection, getting in touch with. So you can say contact, connect, tag, or write. Right? And I already mentioned the salutation, like you see here, Mr. John Smith. Right? Okay, so let's put this all together with some examples. All right, so if you're looking for a screen name and your name is John Smith is the most common name in English. But I bet using this technique, John Smith could find something without, having to result to numbers, using a number like his birth year or something like that. Which is actually, in terms of internet security, including your birth date at all in your screen name is actually kind of dangerous in terms of internet security. So that's not really a good thing to do. But you can see the different iterations that John Smith went through. So he first tried his name, John Smith. Said, okay, that didn't work. So Smith John, that didn't work. John Q. Smith has a middle initial in there. That didn't work. Smith John Q. Okay, didn't work. Now Smith Q. John would not work, right? Putting that middle initial, it's just, that would be a little bit of a strange organization. Mr. John Smith, Dr. John Q. Smith. So now he's introducing his title with the middle initial. John Smith, PhD. John Q. Smith, PhD could be a possibility. And then the very last one on this list, you see Mr. John Smith, CPA. Okay. Over to the right-hand column, now we've got the adjectives. Contact John Smith. Contact Dr. John Smith. Write Dr. John Smith. So on and so on and so on. And it gets a little bit, you've got John Smith Taxman, John Smith Taxes, John Smith CPA Official. Right? So if you're really having a hard time, and if you're in any kind of a public figure role, where you're in the media at all, or even just advertising, you could put that word official on there as well, and it would make sense. I am John Q. Smith, CPA. It's the last one, right? So these are some examples of how you can approach this, and I'm sure that a real John Smith would probably be able to find an email address that he could use using this method, as I mentioned. Now, once you have your screen name chosen, I highly recommend that you try to find that screen name on other services and properties. Okay, so these are some popular ones: Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. All right, so with LinkedIn, you will, after you sign up, you will have to choose your URL, your URL, and you want to get something pretty close to your common screen name. So ideally, on every service that you use, you would have the same screen name for each one. Okay? Also, the link below, the bit.ly link, bit.ly/reserve domain name, that is going to take you to a place where you can actually purchase a domain name. So like, I'm going to step back a minute. If you got John Smith Taxman, he could reserve johnsmithtaxman.com. Okay? He may have no interest, John Smith might have no interest in having a personal website now, today. But that could change in a few years. And in fact, I really think that it will change. I think pretty soon, maybe just 5 years in the future, it's going to be normal for everybody to have their own personal website. So having your domain name is going to be really important. And the closest you can get to your real name, the shorter it is, the better, the more impressive, the more professional it's going to seem. Right? So it's pretty cheap. It's like $10 a month on Namecheap. Other services might be like $15 a month. But reserving your domain name is worthwhile, even if you're not quite ready to have your own website or blog or anything like that. So, in regards to reserving a domain name, .com, .net, and .org are the best. I would really try to get a .com, number one. That's way better than all of them. .net is okay. .org is kind of weird for like a personal website. .org typically is for nonprofit organizations. But for .com and .net, people don't really take it that seriously, because .com is such a standard. Right? .co is not, so the three, .com, .net, and .org are considered the top level TLDs. They're the top level domains that get the most respect. .co and .me, also .io, they're not that top tier, but they are, pretty well respected. People do understand those are quite common and normal. Nowadays, you have a variety of kind of creative TLDs. These are the ones in red with the red highlights that you can see on this slide. .club, .tech, .life, .online. These are not really seen as professional. In a few years, that'll probably change. I'm sure it will change because honestly, we're running out of domain names, right? Every day, thousands of these domain names get taken up, get reserved by somebody. Okay. Anyway, try to get your .com or your .net. You might even pick up an additional one like a .tv or something like that if you think you might have a YouTube channel someday or whatever. It'll be really worth your time to reserve your domain name if you have it available. And as I mentioned, you use this bit.ly/reserve domain name, and that'll take you through the namecheap.com, which is the one that I personally recommend the most. And this will actually help support this course. Okay? This is a affiliate link, so I'll get a little bit, I think it's like 5% or something of what you pay for that domain name. Also, if you do consider having your own website, you could just have your own site where it has your picture, your name, and some contact information. But starting your own blog can actually be a big asset for your career. Or, if you have a hobby that you're really, really serious about, it can be good for your hobby too. But blogging is best used for an area where you that's your profession, or you hope that it will be your profession someday soon. Right? So it's great for your career. It really establishes you as what we call a thought leader, your thought leadership. And it's really amazing for learning English, actually. Blogging in English helps you connect with the global community. And, blogging in English, using the English. So writing some kind of English journal as you study English is a pretty common practice. And these days, if you can do that with a blog, once you have like an intermediate level ability and you're blogging about a specific topic related with your career, it can really help accelerate your English ability and your English writing skill. Okay? It can also be really cheap to start. There are free blogging services out there, but I do recommend that you at least have a domain name. So that domain name is going to cost you $10 to $15 per year, but you can just set that to forward to your free blog on another service if you want. You can do it really simply like that. And you can just tell people, oh yeah, it's johnsmithcpa.com, right? That's my blog where I blog about paying your taxes, right? And they'll be able to find it that way. In the future, you might think more about having a more professional website and blog and all that. That's fine. That stuff can wait. But for now, if you've been wanting to do it for a long time, get started. Getting started sooner is better than later, because a few years down the line, they're going to look back and say, oh, you've been blogging about this topic for 4 years now. You're pretty knowledgeable. You've established yourself pretty well, right? And they're going to take you much more seriously. Now, in the academic world, a lot of academics have been slow to get into blogging. But in the past year or two, I think it's really taken off. I'm seeing more and more of these academic blogs kind of taking off. And some of them talk about academia itself, so some of the problems in academia. Some of them talk about their research area specifically. Some people use a blog post to explore a topic that they thought of as a possible research project. And then they type it all out, and then they see what kind of feedback they get. They might even send the blog post to somebody and see what kind of feedback they get from that person to help them decide if they want to really get into this area of research, right? Spending months if not years of their life working on that particular topic. You can kind of set it up on a blog, make a blog post out of it, and that blog post will help you kind of test the waters. Okay, so to wrap this all up, we talked about choosing a provider and why I strongly recommend Gmail and why I'm going to be using Gmail for this course. We also talked about, using organizational email as well as possibly paying for email, which I think you should consider maybe in the future. You don't have to do it right now, but have that, realize that in the next few years it may be necessary to start paying for an email service. And then most importantly, we talked about how to come up with a good screen name that is professional and fits with kind of global practices with internet usage.